In the heart of impenetrable darkness, where the feeble moonlight battled valiantly against the suffocating shroud of ancient trees, a cemetery lay nestled, forgotten by the relentless march of time. Within its boundaries, the souls of the departed slumbered eternally, or so the naive townsfolk believed. Unbeknownst to them, this cemetery was more than just a resting place. It was a realm, a twilight zone where the fragile line between life and death blurred into obscurity, and ethereal spirits roamed freely under the silvery luminescence of the moon. On a chilling, mist-laden night, a group of intrepid friends dared to venture into this ghostly sanctuary, their youthful faces masked with bravado yet their hearts drumming a frantic rhythm of fear. Among them was Sarah, a soul with an insatiable curiosity for the supernatural, and Mark, a skeptic whose presence was an attempt to debunk the irrational fears that plagued the others. Little did they grasp that their lives were teetering on the precipice of an irreversible transformation. Beyond the cemetery gates, an ominous hush descended upon the group, shattered only by the distant, mournful hoots of an owl. The tombstones rose like ancient sentinels, their weather-beaten inscriptions fading away beneath the assault of centuries' rain and wind. Unfazed by the palpable atmosphere of foreboding, Sarah, her hands steady, led the group deeper into the cemetery, her flashlight cutting through the pitch-black night to illuminate the crumbling epitaphs of the deceased. They congregated around a decaying mausoleum, its stone facade adorned with intricate carvings of celestial beings locked in eternal combat. With trembling hands, Sarah pushed open the ponderous door, revealing a yawning blackness within. Boldly, or perhaps recklessly, they ventured forth. As they delved deeper into the Stygian void, peculiar occurrences began to unfold. Shadows capered on the walls, disembodied whispers threaded through the empty corridors, and icy fingers ghosted over their skin. Mark, the cynic, attempted to dismiss these phenomena as mere figments of their imagination, but even he couldn't ignore the escalating sense of dread coiling in the pit of his stomach. Abruptly, a scream of sheer terror rent the air, its reverberations sending spine-tingling shudders down their backs. They turned in unison, only to witness Emily, one of their companions, being dragged mercilessly into the obsidian depths by unseen hands. Panic seized them, and they grasped desperately, trying to reclaim her, but she was gone, swallowed whole by the abyss. Chaos erupted, and the group scattered like frightened prey, their terrified cries blending with the eerie, mournful wails that seemed to seep from the very stone walls of the mausoleum. Each member of the group was now prey to malevolent spirits, their eyes aglow with an otherworldly fervor. Mark, recognizing the gravity of their plight, frantically scoured the darkness for an escape route, his heart hammering violently within his chest. Amidst his frantic search, Mark stumbled upon an ancient tome, its pages teeming with cryptic incantations and arcane rituals. Desperation fueled his courage, and he began to chant the words, hoping against hope to banish the wrathful spirits that plagued the cemetery. The air crackled with an otherworldly energy, and the very ground beneath his feet trembled. For a fleeting moment, it seemed as though the ritual might be working. Yet, in a cruel twist of fate, the ground beneath him gave way, and Mark found himself hurtling into a concealed catacomb beneath the cemetery. It was a labyrinthine expanse of bones and decay, where the restless dead wandered in eternal torment. Mark, utterly alone now, felt a frisson of fear crawl up his spine as he realized he was not alone in the catacomb. Glowing eyes glimmered in the darkness, and skeletal hands reached out for him, drawing him inexorably into the Stygian shadows. His cries reverberated through the catacomb, merging with the agonized wails of the imprisoned souls around him. The cemetery had claimed another victim, adding one more lost soul to its ever-expanding collection. Above ground, the remaining friends, battered and shattered, miraculously managed to escape the clutches of the cemetery. They fled into the night, their minds haunted by the grotesque horrors they had borne witness to. The ancient cemetery, once a sanctuary of tranquility, now pulsed with an insidious, dark energy, its very essence tainted by the unspeakable events that had transpired within its hallowed walls. And thus, the cemetery endured as a macabre reminder of the ominous shadows lurking beneath the facade of our world, a place where the boundary between life and death wavered precariously. Here, the spectral inhabitants hungered for the souls of the living, yearning for the warmth of life to alleviate their eternal anguish. To this day, the cemetery looms as a somber admonition of the unfathomable terror that lies dormant beneath the surface of our reality, a locale where the veil between existence and oblivion is diaphanous, and where the departed spirits bide their time, patiently awaiting the arrival of the living, eager to ensnare more wandering souls into their unending nightmare. In the heart of a desolate and forsaken town, shrouded beneath an eternal veil of mist and shadow, an ancient cemetery loomed, its very existence a testament to the passage of time. The wrought iron gates, corroded and gnarled by the relentless march of years, emitted mournful groans in the wind, as if lamenting the forgotten souls that slumbered within its hallowed grounds. Tombstones, weather-beaten and rugged, protruded from the earth like skeletal fingers clawing desperately at the heavens. Their inscriptions whispered long-lost tales of lives extinguished in the eons past. Here, where no songbirds trilled and no blossoms dared to bloom, the land itself seemed cursed, and even nature recoiled, reluctant to tread upon the unhallowed soil. On a night devoid of moonlight, when the stars themselves cowered behind a blanket of obsidian, a fearless band of adventurers, driven by the reckless curiosity that so often ensnares the young and the foolhardy, dared to trespass into the depths of the cemetery's eerie embrace. Among the intrepid souls was Sarah, a spirited and audacious young woman whose eyes blazed with a fiery determination capable of challenging the fiercest storms. Beside her stood Mark, Emily, and Alex, their footsteps trembling in harmony with the silence that enveloped the night. As they crossed the threshold of the cemetery, a bone-chilling breeze swept through the air, causing the candles they carried to flicker and sway in a macabre dance. Undeterred, Sarah forged ahead, her flashlight cutting through the darkness like a beacon of audacity. The tombstones, mute sentinels of the deceased, loomed over the trespassers, their ancient inscriptions murmuring long-forgotten chronicles. Yet, the cemetery was not as desolate as it seemed. Emerging from the murky depths of shadow, a figure materialized, draped in robes that clung to its emaciated form like tatters of a forgotten tapestry. Its eyes glowed with an ethereal luminescence, and its voice, when it grumbled forth, sent shivers cascading down the spines of the intruders. "Here, you venture where the living and the dead blur," the figure intoned, its voice a sepulchral rasp, seemingly emanating from the very bowels of the earth. "Beware, for the boundary is thin, and the spirits you disturb are not to be trifled with." Sarah, defiant and undeterred, pressed on, her bravado masking the tendrils of fear that coiled within her. The group ventured deeper, oblivious to the spectral awakening transpiring around them. Whispers, laden with long-buried secrets, saturated the air, and the earth beneath their feet pulsed with a disquieting energy. In the heart of the cemetery, a time-worn mausoleum stood sentinel, its door slightly ajar, inviting curiosity. Intrigued, Sarah pushed it open, revealing an abyssal interior swallowed by impenetrable darkness. Unyielding, she stepped inside, her companions trailing hesitantly behind her. Within the mausoleum, the air grew frigid, and a feeble, ghostly luminescence imbued the space with an eerie ambience. Peculiar symbols adorned the walls, and a pervasive aroma of decay hung heavy in the air. It was then that they heard it, a symphony of mournful wails and anguished cries reverberating through the chamber. The spirits, stirred and incensed by the intrusion, began to manifest. Ethereal forms flickered in and out of existence, akin to candle flames quivering in a tempestuous breeze. Some bore the scars of their untimely demise, their spectral bodies forever marred by the violence that had extinguished their mortal lives. One apparition, a young woman with hollow eyes and a ragged wedding gown, floated towards Sarah. "Why have you disrupted our eternal slumber?" she moaned, her voice laced with a tapestry of sorrow and bitterness. "We were at peace, and you have ushered chaos into our repose." Sarah, now ensnared by trepidation, stammered an apology, but her words dissolved into the void of indifference. The spirits, engulfed by wrath and torment, whirled around them, their voices ascending to a deafening crescendo. Shadows cavorted on the walls, and the very ground trembled beneath their feet. Desperate to flee, the group bolted from the mausoleum, their footsteps echoing through the chamber as they sprinted back into the night. Yet, the spirits pursued them, their ethereal forms trailing behind like a vengeful fog. As they reached the cemetery gates, the spirits unleashed a collective scream, sending shockwaves rippling through the atmosphere. The earth convulsed violently, rising against the intruders. Sarah and her companions were cast to the ground, their cries merging with the cacophony of tormented souls. In the end, the cemetery reclaimed its tranquility, the mist enshrouding the tombstones once more. The intruders vanished without a trace, their fate a chilling parable to all who dared to disturb the sanctity of the dead. And thus, the cemetery persisted, its mysteries buried deep within the bosom of the earth, awaiting the advent of the next audacious soul destined to awaken the ire of the spirits that dwelled within its haunted precincts. In the midst of the enigmatic silence that engulfed the cemetery, where the interplay of shadows danced wickedly with the scant moonlight, a venerable mausoleum stood, its ancient stones murmuring chilling tales of terror. The air, laden with the aroma of decomposing leaves and moist soil, hung heavily around them. The sole audible cadence was the sporadic rustle of leaves, resembling ghostly fingers skittering across graves. On this ominous night, the cemetery was not as devoid of life as it pretended to be. A cadre of intrepid adolescents, enticed by the allure of the unknown, had congregated under the shroud of darkness. They had been tantalized by the murmurs, the narratives that had traversed generations, about the spectral entities that plagued this desolate expanse. Unperturbed by cautionary whispers, they embarked on an expedition into the abyss, a venture that would etch itself indelibly into the recesses of their minds. As the clock's hands converged at midnight, the group clustered near the towering mausoleum, their breaths crystallizing in the frigid, mist-laden atmosphere. Sarah, the most audacious of the lot, moved ahead, her flashlight casting elongated, distorted silhouettes on the crypt's time-weathered stone walls. With hands trembling, she nudged open the colossal door, revealing an abyss-like interior that seemed to greedily consume the feeble luminescence of their flashlights. With cautious steps, they advanced, their footfalls reverberating ominously within the silence. The chill in the air deepened, and a palpable sense of foreboding descended upon them like a suffocating veil. Abruptly, a spine-chilling scream ruptured the stillness, causing the group to whirl around. There stood Emily, her countenance a mask of terror, her trembling finger pointing at a faded portrait hanging on the wall. The portrait depicted a malevolent figure, his eyes hollow and baleful, his lips contorted into a sinister grin. Legend whispered that he was the cemetery's custodian, driven to madness by the specters that roamed the grounds. As the narrative went, he had forged an unholy alliance, damning the cemetery and all who dared to encroach. Before their horrified gazes, the portrait seemed to stir to life. The man's eyes glinted with an infernal glow, and his laughter reverberated through the mausoleum, sending icy tendrils down their spines. Desperate to flee, the group lunged toward the exit, but the massive door thundered shut with a resounding clang, ensnaring them within its inky embrace. Panic ensued as they grasped the truth. They were not alone. Murky figures lurked in the room's recesses, their hollow orbs fixated on the intruders. The air thickened with malevolence, and the temperature plummeted, freezing their breaths in midair. Whispers, insidious and tormenting, slithered into their ears, and skeletal hands emerged from the shadows, clawing at their flesh. In their frenzied attempts to escape, the group splintered. Sarah, once the stalwart leader, found herself solitary in a labyrinthine corridor, its walls closing in around her. The walls seemed to pulse with a sinister vitality, the very ground beneath her feet writhing, ensnaring her in a nightmarish maze. As she staggered through the maze-like passageways, the whispers crescendoed, their utterances indecipherable yet undeniably menacing. The shadows contorted and warped, assuming monstrous guises that slithered and crept toward her. Sarah's screams reverberated through the mausoleum, but her cries for help were swallowed by the abyss. Simultaneously, the others grappled with their own horrors. Mark was pursued by the ethereal apparition of the caretaker, a specter hell-bent on vengeance. Emily was plagued by the anguished cries of tormented children, their wails echoing in her ears. The once courageous group was reduced to quivering souls, frantically seeking an exit from the nightmare that had ensnared them. Hours elapsed, although it felt like an eternity, as the group wrestled against the malevolent forces that ensnared them. Just when hope waned, a faint glimmer of dawn pierced the mausoleum's cracks. The first light of morning seemed to weaken the supernatural entity's grasp, endowing the survivors with newfound fortitude. Summoning every ounce of bravery, the remaining members of the group united, battling their way through the labyrinth of corridors and phantoms. With each stride, the oppressive atmosphere lifted, and the whispers faded into oblivion. Finally, they stumbled out of the mausoleum, gasping for air as the daylight enveloped them. The cemetery, once a realm of terror, now appeared almost tranquil in the early morning sunlight. They were battered and scarred, both physically and mentally, but they were alive. The night's ordeal would haunt them perpetually, an indelible reminder of the supernatural horrors lurking in the shadows. They would forever remember the long, harrowing night spent amidst vengeful spirits and malignant forces, an experience destined to be etched into their minds as a tale of unparalleled horror. Despite their efforts to move forward, the cemetery would persist, a specter in the depths of their nightmares, patiently waiting to remind them of the night they dared to tread on unhallowed ground.